The house smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. I hadn't even brought in the couch yet, just the keys and the silence. The front door gave a satisfying click as it shut behind me. No echo of voices, no shoes cluttering the hallway, no framed photos judging me from a mantel. Just walls mine. Light pooled through the tall windows still bare. The air was dry and new, touched with the chemical trace of fresh caulk unpacked cabinets and the nervous sweat of risk. I let the keys drop into my palm again and again, the metal clinking against my skin like punctuation I couldn't quite finish. It was Thursday, and Tucson's late September heat was giving way to something softer. The breeze from the open back door carried in the scent of dust and dry cactus bloom. There was no couch yet, no table, no bed frame. Just boxes labeled in permanent marker, a rolled-up rug, and the hollow thud of my sneakers as I stepped from tile to wood. I knew what this meant. What I'd done. My mother once told me, "Nothing you buy is really yours unless you've earned it the right way." I should have known right meant approved by her. In our family, big decisions were made in groups, or at least in whispers. Not alone, not secretly. But I was 36 with a salary, a lawyer on speed dial, and 20 years of family dinners behind me. And this house. This was mine. My savings. My name on the deed. My signature on every page of the contract. No cosigner. No permission. No guilt. Or at least, that was the plan. I walked through the kitchen, white quartz counters, soft close drawers, a double sink so clean it almost gleamed. I ran my hand along the fridge handle, cool to the touch. It still had the warranty tag swinging from it. Then into the hallway where 3 closed doors waited like unplayed cards. One for a guest room, maybe. One for a home office. One for... I didn't know yet. A nursery. A library I hadn't planned that far ahead. Buzz. I pulled my phone from my pocket. A voicemail from Rachel. My younger sister's name lit up the screen like an alarm bell. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I set the phone face down on the kitchen island and leaned against the counter. Rachel would be calling about something innocuous. Or not. A dinner. A birthday. Another mom wants to talk to you about something. I had ignored the last 2 messages, too. I opened the sliding glass door and stepped onto the small concrete patio. The backyard was modest, fenced in with a few patches of overwatered grass and a young orange tree at the edge still staked. It would grow eventually, just like this house would settle like I would. I stood there in the dying light watching the shadows stretch long. I thought about telling them, telling Mom, telling Rachel, even Dad. Just a simple call, a group text maybe. "Hey, just wanted to share some good news, I bought a house," but I hadn't. Because I knew what would follow. The comments, the silence. The way Diane would say, "Oh," and then not say anything for 3 whole seconds before adding, "Well, I guess that's what you wanted." The way Rachel would pivot, cheerful but clipped, as if my independence had personally offended her calendar. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They did in their way. But they loved order more. Tradition. Consultation. The idea that big choices were family business. My chest tightened. I walked back inside, locking the glass door behind me. Buzz. Another message. I reached for the phone, but this time it was a group text. From Mom. "Surprise, we'll all come by after dinner this weekend. Can't wait to see your new place. Love, Mom." My thumb hovered over the screen. How I hadn't posted a thing. The deed hadn't even cleared through the county records yet. Ethan had promised discretion. The real estate agent swore up and down they wouldn't notify anyone. I hadn't used my mailing address for anything personal yet. No shipping. No forwarding. No one should know. My breathing grew shallow. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. The air shifted. The walls, once clean and empty, now seemed to lean in. My thumb finally moved, tapping open the group thread. Rachel had replied, Yay, can't wait. I'll bring the kids. They're gonna love the backyard. Dad had added a thumbs up emoji. Another ding. From a cousin I hadn't seen in months. Wow, you finally did it. Good for you, Claire. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wasn't ready for this. I hadn't wanted a housewarming. I hadn't wanted anyone's blessing. I wanted time, space, the chance to be proud of something without someone else planting a flag in it. A missed call blinked at the top of my screen. Diane. I didn't open it. I dropped the phone onto the counter and stared out the front window. The street was empty, desert quiet. The kind of quiet I used to dream about. How the hell did they find out they brought the kids? That's how I knew it wasn't just a visit. The moment I opened the door, I saw them tiny sneakers stomping my welcome mat, juice pouches in hand, sticky fingers already reaching for the doorframe. Behind them came Rachel smiling like nothing was wrong, and Jason trailing behind with a cooler slung over one shoulder. Diane, of course, was last, arms full of grocery bags and her purse bouncing on her hip like a weapon. I blinked. You said after dinner? Rachel kissed my cheek. Yeah, we finished early. The kids were excited. They swept in like wind through an open gate. I hadn't even gotten the second bedroom unpacked, let alone finished putting sheets on my own bed. The house was still in that strange halfway state, moving boxes lining the hallway, half the kitchen still sealed in bubble-wrap picture frames leaned against walls instead of hung. The kids tore into the living room like it was a bounce house. One of them tripped over an unopened box labeled Books Office and laughed. The youngest, Emily, dragged a blanket from the hallway and promptly curled up on the rug. I stood there, one hand still on the doorknob, watching my private space dissolve under the weight of familiarity. Rachel used to joke, "Why rent when you can just live with Claire?" She wasn't joking anymore. I brought pasta, Diane announced, heading straight for the kitchen like she owned the deed. And salad. And ice cream, but that's for later. Jason was already unloading the cooler, popping open soda cans and offering them around like it was a picnic. The sound of drawers opening and closing came in quick succession. Diane had begun her inevitable rearranging. These mugs should go here. You'll want them by the coffee maker, she said without looking at me. I was still figuring out the layout. I muttered. Well, now you don't have to. Rachel plopped onto a box marked linens, adjusting her sweater. The house looks so much bigger than it did in the pictures. Mom was right, this place has great bones. Pictures? I asked sharply. Jason shrugged. She found them through the real estate site or something. Ethan must have shared it with someone. That wasn't possible. Ethan was careful. But I said nothing. I was already behind. The kids ran past again, chasing each other with foam swords that I hadn't seen them bring in. Something slammed. I flinched. Anyway, Rachel said, pulling her hair back into a ponytail, "We're just gonna stay a bit. Things are still weird with our lease. Jason's job situation, nothing major. Just until we figure out next steps." I stared. Stay. Just for a little while, she said like it was obvious. The kids love it here. Diane chimed in from the kitchen where she was now alphabetizing the spice rack I hadn't even opened. It's temporary, Claire. We're not trying to take over. That was exactly what it felt like. The air shifted. I could almost feel the walls protesting with me, wondering how they'd gone from sanctuary to common room in under 10 minutes. I looked around. The cooler was in the living room. Toys were already spilling from an overnight bag, and someone had parked a tricycle on the porch. I hadn't said yes, but I hadn't said no fast enough. Dinner was chaos. Plates clinked, napkins disappeared, and the kids spilled orange soda onto the new area rug. Diane scolded them, then winked at me like it was charming. Rachel asked if I'd considered painting the walls a softer color, maybe sage, to open up the space. Jason played a game on his phone. I kept eating in silence, tasting none of it. Afterward, I gathered up empty cans and threw them into the recycling bin I hadn't even filled yet. Rachel looked relaxed, her legs tucked under her on the couch that hadn't even been sat on by me yet. One of the kids was asleep in her lap. Another had passed out with a controller in hand, though the TV wasn't even plugged in. Jason was scrolling Zillow. "This house has a good vibe," he said suddenly. "Mom said she always meant for us to have something like this." My head snapped toward him. "Mom said what?" He shrugged. "That she always imagined we'd find a place for the whole family, where the kids could grow up around their aunt, maybe even grandma. A kind of shared space. You know, no, I didn't know. I didn't know when the definition of my house had become our house. I didn't remember voting on it. And I certainly didn't recall inviting anyone to live here. But somehow, over pasta and polite lies, it had been decided. They had made the decision, and I'd been too stunned to stop it. It was dark when I finally escaped. Everyone else had fallen into a soft haze of comfort, sprawled bodies, dim lighting, murmured laughter. I moved through the house like a stranger stepping over socks, plastic toys, and a dropped sippy cup. I opened my bedroom door, ready to shut it behind me, to find a sliver of the space I'd fought to carve out. Diane's luggage was on the floor, a soft leather suitcase. Familiar. Worn. Hers. I stared at it, breath locked in my throat. Not in the guest room. Not in the hallway. In my bedroom. The smell of her perfume lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable. I felt the invisible hand of my mother again, not knocking, not asking, just being. Already inside. Always inside. I backed out slowly, hand still on the doorknob, trying not to make a sound. Claire walks into her bedroom and finds Diane's luggage on the floor. When I changed the locks, I knew I was declaring war. I just didn't realize I was already losing. The key slid out of the old lock with a satisfying click, landing in my palm like the last piece of someone else's control. I crumpled the original set into a sandwich bag and dropped it into the bottom of my purse, careful not to let the metal clink too loudly. The morning air still carried a desert chill, but my hands were warm, too warm, with adrenaline. Home Depot at 7:15 a.m. was eerily peaceful. The aisles smelled like sawdust and varnish. A man in a red vest nodded at me without asking if I needed help. I already knew what I wanted. Keyless entry deadbolt, brushed nickel, something modern, something decisive. The package was heavier than I expected. I gripped it tighter. Diane used to have a saying, "Doors stay open in this family." But they weren't her doors anymore. And I had just closed one, literally. Back at the house, the SUV was gone. Probably school drop-offs, errands, yoga. I had 2 hours, maybe 3 to finish before the day caught up with me. I laid everything out on the welcome mat, screwdriver, pliers, new screws. I worked quietly, biting the inside of my cheek to stay focused. My father taught me how to do this when I was 16, back when the idea of owning a house was a future I didn't know I'd have to fight for. The door gave a satisfying thunk when I tested it. I pressed the code, heard the bolt slide cleanly, and exhaled. For the first time in days, I felt a small flicker of peace. Then my phone buzzed. "Ethan." "I did it," I said, without waiting for hello. "New locks. It's done." There was a pause on the line. "Okay," he said carefully. "I support it. But Claire, just know you've set a precedent now. I'm not apologizing for securing my own home. I'm not saying you should. But don't be surprised if they spin it. You know your family. They'll make this about everything except boundaries." "I know." "Good. Then brace for impact." He hung up. I stood in the hallway and looked at the silent proof of what I'd done. A new lock. A tiny rebellion. But not invisible. Not this time. The front door opened around 11:40 a.m., or at least tried to. Click. Nothing. Then knocking. Then more knocking. I walked over, pulled the door open just a few inches. Rachel stood there, keys in hand, her mouth half open in disbelief. Behind her, I could see the kids in the car, restless. "What the hell, Claire?" "I changed the locks." "You what?" "I changed them. It's my house." She stared at me, searching my face for a weakness. You didn't even tell us. You didn't ask if you could move in. We didn't move in, she snapped. We were staying a few nights. For the kids. Until Jason hears back about you brought air mattresses. Diane reorganized the entire kitchen. You left luggage in my bedroom. Her jaw twitched. You're excluding my children. That's not what this is. You're making them feel unwelcome. They're children, Rachel. They go where you take them. The pause that followed was brief, but brutal. Then, you're just mad because Mom said this house should have gone to me. The words came out like venom spat, not spoken. For a moment, even she looked shocked she'd said it. I stepped back, shutting the door slowly, deliberately. I didn't take this house from you. I bought it. Alone. From the other side of the door, her voice came lower, colder. You're going to regret this. I didn't answer. Silence returned, but it was heavier now. Not the peaceful kind. The watchful kind. Later that day, I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing paperwork Ethan had emailed when my voicemail pinged. New message 1 Hi Ms. Nguyen. This is Sandra from the HOA board. Just wanted to touch base. We've received a few informal concerns from neighbors regarding unusual traffic and noise. Nothing formal yet, but if you could give us a call back when you get the chance. Thanks so much. Unusual traffic noise. So now the neighbors were involved. Of course they were. Diane was a talker. Rachel knew how to seed sympathy in the right ears. It wouldn't be hard to paint me as the selfish spinster who'd shut out her own family after getting a free house. I stared at the phone, heartbeat in my ears. It wasn't just internal anymore. The story was spreading. I walked down the hall to my bedroom, already exhausted. I just needed a minute. A breath. Maybe a nap. Or a moment where nothing was being asked of me. The door creaked as I opened it. And then I saw it. A Bible. Lying open on my nightstand. I hadn't brought one into the house. Hadn't owned one in years. Its pages fluttered slightly from the ceiling fan. I moved closer. A passage was highlighted in neon yellow. Honor thy father and mother. I stood frozen, the air around me thinning. They had been in here. Today. After I locked them out. And somehow they still had a way in. Claire finds a Bible left open on her nightstand. Highlighted honor thy father and mother. It wasn't a dinner. It was a deposition with pot roast and judgmental glances. The roast was still steaming in the center of the table, its juices pooling like a quiet surrender. The mashed potatoes had cooled stiff at the edges, and someone, probably Diane, had reset the salt and pepper shakers into perfectly parallel lines. I'd cooked. Of course I had. I had a reputation now, didn't I? So generous, they said. So thoughtful. But as I stirred gravy in silence, no one asked me about the recipe. When Rachel stirred a pot, they called it talent. When I did it, it was survival. They were already seated by the time I brought out the bread rolls. Diane in her usual spot, claiming the head of the table without asking. Rachel and Jason side by side, perfectly paired like matching place settings. Their kids had been fed earlier, apparently, and were now watching a movie in the living room. I'd wanted to ask when that decision was made. I didn't. And then, Evelyn arrived. My grandmother walked in with a scarf knotted neatly at her throat and the softest click of shoes on tile. Her eyes were sharp as ever. She didn't hug me, just patted my arm and said, "Smells nice." It was the first genuine thing anyone had said all evening. Then came the wild card. Darlene. I opened the door, expecting maybe another casserole or a last-minute guest dish, some contribution to the meal I hadn't agreed to host. Instead, Darlene stood there in her HOA pinstripe and pearl earrings, holding a bottle of red wine already uncorked. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, stepping inside before I could respond. Rachel mentioned this. Dinner said it was a special occasion. I just had to meet the woman holding this family together. The cork still sat in her purse like evidence. Dinner began in careful silence, the clink of forks the only noise for the first few minutes. I kept my eyes on my plate. Mashed potatoes, over-salted green beans, butter too cold to spread. Everything just a little bit off. Diane was the first to speak. Claire, you've really done a beautiful job here. You know, when we imagined this house, I always pictured Sunday dinners. When you imagine this house? I repeated softly. Mm-hmm. She hummed, pretending not to hear the edge. Jason broke the tension with a joke about traffic. Rachel followed with a story about her son's preschool teacher and a hilarious mix-up with finger paints. Darlene chuckled politely. Then Rachel leaned toward Darlene napkin folded in her lap like a diplomat. Honestly, we've just been so touched by Claire's generosity. She didn't hesitate when we needed somewhere to land. Family first, right? Darlene smiled, clearly charmed. Well, not every sibling would be so welcoming. It's inspiring. I swallowed a bitter laugh with a sip of water. This was a game. A long, elegant one played in 3 courses. The table was their stage. The audience, Darlene, and anyone else who might carry this version of events back to the HOA. Claire's always been independent, Diane added, spearing a carrot. But deep down, she has a good heart. I always said it's not about who pays for the roof, it's about who gathers under it. Evelyn's fork paused midair. Her eyes shifted toward me just once. I couldn't read them. I caught Rachel watching me too, like she was daring me to explode. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I reached for another roll I didn't want. The night dragged on in smiles so tight they left wrinkles. Stories spun out about family barbecues we never had, childhood birthdays exaggerated for effect, and shared memories I didn't remember sharing. Then came the toast. Diane lifted her glass of lukewarm Chardonnay and said, "To family, may we always share what we have, even if it wasn't ours to begin with." The silence was deafening. I looked at Evelyn. Her brow furrowed ever so slightly. Jason shifted in his seat. Rachel just smiled into her wineglass like it was a mirror. They'd said it out loud now. Not in legal terms. Not in threats. But the claim was there. This house, my home, was now part of the family mythology, the kind that twisted truth into memory and memory into entitlement. Evelyn placed her glass down untouched. She leaned closer to me, her voice low enough that only I could hear it. "This all feels familiar." My stomach turned. I didn't ask her what she meant. I already knew. History was repeating itself. I just hadn't realized I was playing a role in a drama that began long before I bought this house. The table buzzed around me again. Laughter dishes passed another fake compliment about the gravy. But her words sat in my lap like a stone. "This all feels familiar." You know it's war when someone tells your story louder and sooner than you could. It started with a ping, one of those alerts from a social media platform I hadn't used in weeks. Rachel had tagged me in a post. I almost ignored it, assuming it was some outdated family photo or a throwback to a better time that never really existed. But the caption froze me. 3 kids. 1 sofa. No home. If you've ever had to choose between family and pride, you know our story. We're just trying to keep our children safe. Any help is deeply appreciated. Beneath it, a GoFundMe link. And the photos. God, the photos. The living room. My living room cluttered with juice boxes, unfolded blankets, and 2 of the kids asleep on the couch I'd paid for. The lighting was soft, deliberate, like they'd staged it. Like poverty porn with central air. The image was cropped, but I knew every pixel. That was my rug, my throw pillow, my framed print of the Arizona desert skyline. I clicked the link. The fundraiser had already hit $1,340 in less than 48 hours. Comments poured in. "Stay strong, Mama." "Can't believe your own sister would do this to you." "Shameful." They didn't know me, but they knew me, at least the version Rachel had fed them. My throat tightened as I closed the tab. I opened it again. I screenshot it. Again. Just in case. If you don't write the narrative Ethan once warned, someone else will. and they won't be kind. I messaged him one word now. We met at a coffee shop near the university neutral ground. He was already there when I arrived, laptop open, eyes scanning something too fast to absorb. A cold brew sat untouched beside him. "They're serious," I said without sitting. "So are we." He turned his screen. "I've archived the GoFundMe page, captured metadata, and pulled their social post history going back 6 months. Rachel's been laying this groundwork for a while." I blinked. This wasn't spontaneous. Nothing about this is. She's been rebranding you as the estranged sister since last summer. Light jabs at first, vague allusions to tension, then escalation. I sat slowly. "How bad is it?" Ethan exhaled through his nose, not quite a sigh. "She's smart. Never names you directly, but the subtext is bulletproof. Enough breadcrumbs for people to draw conclusions. And the comments. They're doing the rest of the storytelling for her." I sipped the bitter house coffee and tried not to gag. I feel like I'm being erased. In my own house. "Not erased," Ethan said. "Rewritten." We spent the next hour in quiet coordination. He showed me how to archive content, how to back up photos with timestamps. I learned to screen record, not just screenshot. He created a shared folder, Claire v. Narrative, evidence repository. Somewhere between downloading and rage scrolling, my phone rang. Evelyn. "Hey, sweetie," she said, soft and cautious. "Hi. I was thinking about you." "Lots of people are thinking about me these days," I muttered. A pause. Then I know that tone. That was Linda's tone too. Linda, Aunt Linda. Your dad's sister. I haven't heard her name in years. She disappeared, remember? But before that there was a situation. She had a condo in Phoenix. Bought it herself. Then your grandfather had a heart issue, and suddenly, the family decided she should move back in with them. She resisted. Things got ugly. What happened? She left. Walked away. But not before they made her look like the villain. I sat with that for a beat. No one ever told me. No one tells the version where the woman walks away on her own terms, Evelyn said quietly. I wanted to ask more, but I heard a shuffle, someone calling her name in the background. "Another time, honey," she said. "Just know. This all feels familiar." We ended the call. I sat with the silence for a while, phone warm in my hand, guilt colder in my gut. Later that night, I curled up on the edge of my bed, laptop open, journal beside me. The Bible had been removed from my nightstand, but the absence of it still pressed on me, like it had left behind something sticky. I started to write. They don't get to tell my story. Not like this. Page after page. I wrote down dates, quotes, expressions, reactions, memories both mine and stolen from me. I wrote like my future depended on it because I was starting to believe it did. And in that same breath, I knew what Ethan would say. He asked it the next day after reviewing the newest screenshots. "They're playing this online and in real life. Are you ready to go public?" I looked at him steady. "Not yet. But when I do, I won't just speak. I'll shout." Sometimes theft looks like borrowed kindness, until you check the signature. The folder Ethan handed me wasn't heavy, but it might as well have been lined with bricks. Inside, itemized lists, printed screenshots, annotated statements, and one particular page with my name printed at the bottom, except it wasn't my handwriting. We were sitting in his office, a clean, professional corner suite downtown, with legal pads stacked like artillery, and a wall of neatly labeled case folders behind him. "Utilities first," he said. "This one's almost laughable." I didn't laugh. Claire Morgan. Requesting third-party access to water and electric services. Requester, Diane Morgan. Relationship mother. Authorization. Signed by Claire Morgan in handwriting that looped. Where mine never had, I stared at the signature. It was like seeing a forgery of your own face. Close enough that others might believe it, but wrong enough to make your stomach turn. She told them it was for efficiency, Ethan said, that you were busy and had given verbal consent. She didn't ask. I never even knew. She didn't need you to know. That's the point. Back at home, I cleared the dining table of everything personal, my journal, my teacup, even the small cactus I kept there, like it might be evidence too. I spread the documents across the table, mortgage copies, past HOA letters, and now a printout of an HOA email chain I'd never seen until Ethan requested it through official counsel. Subject address, change confirmation recipient, rachel.jasonhomeigmail.com. Body per request from resident Claire Morgan, please update all digital communication and notices to this email address going forward. Per request from resident Claire Morgan. I rubbed my temples. The phrase clung to me like mold, the subtle way they'd begun erasing me from my own paper trail. That afternoon, I drove to the local branch of my bank. A young woman named Lydia greeted me nervous, kind, too apologetic for someone who hadn't done anything wrong. "We did receive a flag last week," she said, typing into her computer. "Someone attempted to verify your account over the phone. They had your full name, address, even the last four of your social. Did they make any changes?" "No. Our system blocked them pending verification, but the note is here, and the call log matches your home number." "Not my cell phone." She hesitated. "No. Your landline." "I don't have a landline." She blinked. "Oh." I left the bank with more papers, more logs, more silent evidence that a war was being waged in forms and faxes. That evening, I received an email from the HOA's admin buried in a thread about seasonal landscaping policy. One attachment stood out, an internal memo Ethan had flagged for me. Internal note: family already occupying property. Transfer of title likely imminent per owner request. I reread that line 5 times. I had never requested any transfer. I had never mentioned it, hinted at it, or allowed it to be discussed. But somehow the HOA already considered it a done deal. As if paperwork was just a formality waiting to catch up with the lies. I stared at the words as though they were a mirror. Rachel had never needed a deed. She just needed the perception of inevitability. That's what they were building stone by stone. An emotional case, a social story, a legal shrug from anyone who might intervene. When I returned to Ethan's office the next morning, he didn't greet me with pleasantries. He simply pulled out a chair, closed the door behind us, and said, "You need to start thinking not just as a daughter, but as a plaintiff. The worst betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from people who think your silence is consent." I hadn't planned to go to church. In fact, I'd circled the block 3 times before parking across the street, engine still running, trying to convince myself that I didn't care what they said about me. But when the desire to hear the lies for myself finally won, I stepped onto the gravel lot and followed the sound of organ chords bleeding out the sanctuary doors. The service had just ended. A breeze kicked up, carrying potluck smells, perfume, and low murmurs. I stayed outside just far enough not to be seen, just close enough to catch what mattered. They stood in clusters under the shade trees, paper cups in hand, their Sunday smiles already softening into gossip. "You heard about Claire, right?" a woman near the coffee table whispered to another. Her name tag read, Mrs. Darlene, the same Darlene who had sat at my dinner table just a few weeks ago, drinking my wine like it was communion. I mean, poor Rachel. 3 kids and nowhere stable to live. The second woman clucked her tongue. "You know, some people don't value family until they lose it." I didn't flinch. I'd learned the trick: stay still and let the wound go numb. My name floated past me like it belonged to someone else. Inside, the sanctuary door creaked open. Pastor Turner emerged with a stack of announcements and that over-rehearsed calm that pastors perfect over years of funerals and fractured families. "Before we all go," he said, raising his voice slightly, "just a reminder that the GoFundMe to help the Morgan family is still active. You can find the link in the church newsletter and on our website. We're called to be our brother's keeper and sometimes our sisters too." There was a soft murmur of approval, a few nods. No one questioned whose side God was on. I caught a glimpse of Evelyn standing alone near the steps, arms folded, mouth pressed into a line. A woman tapped her on the shoulder and said something I couldn't hear, gesturing toward the mic. Evelyn shook her head. A subtle movement, but enough. I turned and walked back to my car, each step echoing louder in my chest than on the pavement. The old Toyota was parked under a eucalyptus tree, its hood dusted in yellow leaves. I climbed inside, rolled the windows down, and sat in silence, hand on the steering wheel. Then I heard them. Two women strolled past the back of my car, not seeing me inside. They were close enough I could smell their vanilla sugar body spray. "Maybe she's mentally unwell?" one said, voice syrupy and cruel. "I mean, why else would she kick out her own mother?" The other hummed as if that was the most reasonable conclusion in the world. They didn't stop walking. Didn't glance back. I stayed there, a ghost in my own seat, heat rising from somewhere deeper than shame. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just turned the key, let the engine hum, and reminded myself this wasn't about me anymore. It was about the version of me they were selling and how loudly I needed to dismantle it. Back home, the silence was sharp and expectant. Until it wasn't. The smell hit me first, vanilla and cinnamon. I walked down the hallway with careful steps, and when I turned the corner into the kitchen, I saw them. Rachel standing at my island counter wearing my apron. Her kids sat on stools licking batter from spoons. Flour dusted the countertops like it belonged there. She looked up and smiled. "Hey," she said cheerfully, "you're just in time. I'm trying a new pumpkin bread recipe. If truth were enough, lawyers wouldn't exist." Ethan clicked the cap back on his marker, stepped away from the whiteboard, and exhaled like a man preparing for trial, not family drama. "All right," he said. "Let's go through this again." Behind him, 4 columns loomed in red ink: false claims, HOA violations, fraudulent documents, and defamation. My name sat above them, encased in a rectangular outline labeled plaintiff. I stared at it. Not because I doubted it, but because the permanence of it felt heavier than ink. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Do we have enough?" He smirked. "More than enough. But that doesn't mean they'll play fair." My fingers grazed the edge of the manila folder in my lap, filled with screenshots, receipts, notarized statements, even the GoFundMe metadata. We had timestamps, XIF data, GPS coordinates. Everything short of a confession, and even that I suspected would be excused as misunderstood intent. "I don't want to sue my own family," I muttered. Ethan didn't blink. "You're not suing family, you're suing fraud." The cease and desist letters were typed, signed, and sealed. One to Rachel, one to Diane. They weren't lawsuits, not yet, but they were the first cannonball fired over the bows. We left the office in silence. On the sidewalk, the sun cast long shadows, and I turned mine toward the cafe on Jefferson where I was meeting Jenna. She was already there, waving from the corner table, sunglasses perched on her head like a headband. Realtor chic. "You look like someone who's been in legal hell," she said, sliding me an iced coffee before I even sat. I gave her a half smile. "Not hell. Just the basement." She leaned in. "You know the Whisper campaign is working, right? I mean, people in the neighborhood think you've snapped." Define snapped. Emotionally unstable. Controlling. Maybe even paranoid. So they believe Rachel. They believe noise. Jenna said, eyes sharp. "And Rachel's been loud. Playdates in the driveway. Church fundraisers. She's embedded herself in the neighborhood story and made you the villain." I stirred my drink. "How do I fight that you don't?" "Not directly. You rewrite the story. Make them reread the ending." Back home, I opened my inbox to a message from the HOA. Formal header. Legal tone. Subject: scheduled hearing, property occupancy review, October 27th. Location: HOA boardroom. Purpose review of co-occupancy claims and title clarification attached was a PDF. Rachel had submitted a co-occupancy agreement allegedly signed by me. The signature was laughable. My name again forged. This time with a swooping C I hadn't used since high school. I printed it. I printed everything. The hearing room was colder than expected. Mr. Goldberg, the HOA chair, sat at the head of a long table flanked by board members with their cups of herbal tea and polite distrust. Ethan stood beside me, flipping through our file like a seasoned surgeon. Rachel wasn't there, but her name was, on every document in every implication. "We'd like to begin," Ethan said, by entering into the record photographic evidence submitted online by Rachel Morgan and used to solicit public donations. These photos were taken without the owner's consent. He passed the printouts to Mr. Goldberg, each marked with a label and a digital timestamp. "And here," Ethan continued, "is the XIF data location tagged time-stamped metadata, confirming these were taken from within Ms. Claire Morgan's private residence." Goldberg squinted at the paper. One board member let out a low whistle. The room felt tighter, smaller. Less about HOA rules and more about something undeniably personal. Ethan pressed on. "Additionally, we are submitting this false co-occupancy agreement allegedly signed by Claire Morgan. Forensic analysis pending, but the signature discrepancies are already obvious." The air shifted. Goldberg rubbed his jaw. "This is going to get ugly. I used to think family was the roof over my head. Turns out sometimes it's the mold in the walls." Evelyn's apartment smelled like mint tea and old leather, the scent of someone who had learned to survive by keeping quiet for a very long time. She ushered me in with a look that held neither pity nor surprise, just understanding. "You don't usually visit on Mondays?" she said, setting the kettle back on the stove. "I don't usually have a mother trying to steal my house," I replied, only half joking. She nodded like someone who'd heard it all before. "Sit. I've got something to tell you." The chair creaked under me as I sat, and suddenly I was 6 years old again, being handed a glass of milk while she whispered things no one else dared say out loud. "This all feels familiar," she said, echoing the words she'd muttered at dinner days ago. "You know why I looked up. Because you've seen it." She smiled, bitter and slow. "Because I lived it. Your Aunt Linda. She bought a little condo in Tempe in '91, saved for it on her own. Diane and Robert said it wasn't safe, that she needed help managing. You know what happened?" I didn't answer. I already knew. "They convinced her to add their names to the deed. Just paperwork," they said. Within a year, she was renting a room in someone else's basement. My hands clenched the mug. Why didn't anyone stop them? Because Linda was too ashamed to ask for help. And because people believe parents over daughters, especially daughters who say no. Her voice didn't crack, but mine almost did. "I'm not her." "No," Evelyn said, her eyes glinting. "You're worse in their eyes, because you're telling the truth and refusing to be quiet." That night, I logged into my weekly session with Dr. Naomi. Her face appeared framed by soft bookshelves and a ceramic mug labeled, "Not Today, Satan." "You look raw," she said gently. "Is that the clinical term?" She smiled. "No, the clinical term is on the brink of clarity." I hesitated, then told her everything Evelyn had said. About Linda, about Diane, about the legacy no one had warned me came with my last name. I keep asking myself, I said, why it hurts so much. I'm not surprised anymore, but it still cuts. Naomi tapped her pen. "Because hope dies last. That's what betrayal feeds on, hope that maybe this time it'll be different." "And guilt," I whispered. We sat in silence. Then Claire. "What if guilt is just grief in disguise? Grieving the mother you never had, the sister you wanted, the version of family that only existed in your head." After the call, I opened an old plastic bin buried in my hallway closet, one labeled "Childhood Keep." Inside was a scrapbook I hadn't touched in years, Page after page of stickers glitter glue and the desperate optimism of a little girl who thought love was something you earned. I turned to the 8th birthday page. The party had been backyard simple balloons, a piñata, a cake shaped like a rainbow. I remembered being happy that day. But the photo frame was wrong, a rectangle off-center. Someone had cut the photo. I looked closer. My own face sliced out. Only Rachel remained in the picture holding my birthday present, smiling like it was hers. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just closed the book and placed it back inside the bin like I was sealing up a casket. My phone buzzed. Rachel Morgan has posted a new update. I tapped it open knowing I shouldn't. Knowing it would burn. We're finally almost safe. Courts are slow, but God is fast. Faith wins. I didn't bring dessert. I brought documentation. They came hungry. Not just for food, but for control. For the illusion of forgiveness. For the chance to rewrite my story one more time, this time at my own table. The table I'd paid for. The house I'd bought. The name on the deed they tried to erase with enough charm, enough Facebook posts, and just enough plausible deniability. The meatloaf was dry. I'd made it that way on purpose. Rachel filled the silence. The girls loved the zoo this morning. Claire, next time we go, you should come. Maybe you could get one of those year-long passes. What are they like? $50. Jason chuckled like he lived here. Diane refilled her own wine glass without asking, like she owned it. I passed her the cork and kept my voice even. I'm not much for zoos. Shame, Rachel said, smiling sweetly. The kids say this feels like home now. I nodded and returned to cutting my chicken. Evelyn sat at the far end of the table. She didn't eat much, just sipped her chamomile tea and listened. The walls around us felt tight, like a stage set right before the curtains drop. Every glance was rehearsed. Every compliment was a test. You've really made the place cozy. Diane offered eyes, scanning the walls I'd painted by myself. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood, cleared my plate, and walked to the kitchen. The flash drive had been sitting in the fruit bowl all day, camouflaged under plastic bananas. No one had bothered to move. I picked it up casually, walked back to the table, and placed it gently beside the dessert tray. Rachel looked at it like it was ticking. "What's this?" she asked. "Just something for you to look over before the HOA hearing next week," I said. Jason squinted. "Is it about the lease stuff? I thought we were past that." "I didn't think we were anything," I replied. "But this might help clarify." I didn't wait for them to open it. I knew they wouldn't, not in front of Evelyn. Not with Ethan's digital signature time-stamped at the bottom of every folder. Instead, I excused myself and walked out to the porch. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan received. "You just detonated a narrative nuke." I exhaled for the first time that evening. Inside that folder, neatly titled Occupancy Truth, Final.pdf, was everything. Screenshots of Rachel's fake emails to the HOA. A scanned copy of the forged co-occupancy form with a signature that didn't match mine. Metadata from the nanny cam video showing her children calling my bedroom mommy's new room. A recording of Diane saying she doesn't know what's best for this house, followed by Jason agreeing, "We're just helping her transition." And then the closer, a brief voice memo of me on the phone with the bank manager documenting the address change Diane requested illegally. No raised voices, no threats. Just truth presented in full color. Back at the table, no one said anything. Evelyn took another sip of her tea as if she'd been waiting for this moment since the first box was unpacked. She leaned toward me, her voice soft, but weighted. "This time, they won't get away with it. The hearing before the fall. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs a microphone and the right audience." The boardroom wasn't grand. It smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old carpet lit by ceiling panels that buzzed softly like they were holding their breath. 5 folding chairs lined one side of a plastic conference table. A microphone stood on the center like a forgotten relic from someone else's argument. I sat at the edge, back straight, palms on my knees, silent, composed. They were all there. Diane wore pearls and a blouse I'd last seen at my father's funeral, the one with the satin collar she used to smooth when lying. Rachel sat beside her ankle, crossed over ankle lips painted a shade too bright for a hearing. Jason loomed just behind, arms folded, glancing at the wall, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Across from me, Mr. Goldberg adjusted his glasses for the third time, reading the documents Ethan and I had carefully compiled. The man was neutral, yes, but not blind. On the Zoom monitor at the head of the table, Ethan appeared in a small window. He didn't wave. He nodded. He knew. Behind me, Evelyn sat in the row of folding chairs reserved for concerned parties. She held a paper cup of tea and leaned forward just enough to hear. At one point, I heard her whisper to the HOA assistant, "It's about time the truth had legs." I didn't look back. I had already submitted everything: receipts, metadata from the GoFundMe photos, the nanny cam video where Diane walked through my house pointing out which room would be perfect for the twins, the falsified utility requests, and the co-occupancy agreement signed with a signature that was not mine. Now it was their turn to speak. Or unravel. Rachel went first. She opened with a smile. "This isn't a case of fraud. It's a family misunderstanding that got out of hand." She looked at Mr. Goldberg, then scanned the room like she was in a courtroom drama. "Claire has always been independent, and sometimes that means isolating, but she's our family. And when she needed help, she gestured toward Diane. We stepped in, maybe too eagerly, but only out of love." I didn't interrupt. I didn't roll my eyes. That was the trap, to make me look emotional, unstable, cruel. I just listened like Ethan told me. Let the lie grow legs. It'll fall under its own weight. Then Diane spoke. Her voice cracked, not from sadness but calculation. "I gave up everything for Claire. For years. And this house. I told her father I wanted something to pass down. For my grandchildren. I never imagined she'd—" She paused, eyes welling with tears, on cue accused me of theft. She clutched Rachel's hand. Jason looked at the floor. The board asked questions. Calm ones at first. Had I notified them of the disputed occupancy prior to this filing? Yes. Had Diane or Rachel contributed financially to the purchase? No. Did any of them have written permission to live in the house? No. Did they contest the GoFundMe or fake documents? I don't know how that got up there. Rachel said. It was a friend. Diane nodded solemnly, like grief had made her gullible. Then came the part I had rehearsed. I walked through the timeline. I showed copies of the emails, annotated them. I pulled out the HOA letter that mentioned a pending title transfer, a request no one had ever made, least of all me. Ethan guided from the screen, adding legal context when needed. It felt clean, methodical. Then something cracked. Ungrateful, Diane's snapped voice rising for the first time. This is what you do when someone loves you. You twist it into betrayal. Shame on you. Silence followed. Not the kind that demands a response. The kind that confirms everyone just saw something real. Rachel tried to smooth it over, placing a hand on Diane's arm. She's upset, she said. This has been emotional. But no one looked at Diane the same after that. Mr. Goldberg cleared his throat and pushed his chair back slightly. Based on the materials submitted, we will be recommending full occupancy restoration to Ms. Claire Douglas, pending formal vote. I felt nothing at first. Just the absence of pressure. Like someone had loosened a too tight dress collar I hadn't realized was choking me. Then, as I turned to leave, Rachel leaned toward me, voice low, poison sweet. This isn't over. I know things about you too. I paused, but I didn't flinch. She wanted reaction. She got nothing. Let her swing in the silence. They wanted a silent enemy. They got a digital crusader instead. The cursor blinked against the white screen like a dare. I stared at it for a moment, maybe longer than a moment. This wasn't just a post. This was air clearing. This was spine stiffening. This was war, fought not with fists or lawyers this time, but with a login and audience and every screenshot I'd saved in silent anticipation. Title: What You Don't Know About the House on Pecan Street. I typed slowly at first, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted every sentence to land like a heartbeat. Calm, unapologetic, undeniable. Hi, my name is Claire Douglas. I'm a homeowner in the neighborhood. I bought this house in good faith alone, with no co-signers, no help, and no shared deed. Some of you know me. Most of you know my mother and sister better. What I'm about to say isn't easy, but it's necessary, because truth left untold has a way of metastasizing. Then I let it unravel. I included screenshots of Rachel's GoFundMe 3 kids 1 sofa no home, the date stamps, the photos taken inside my living room, the couch, the hallway painting the kitchen backsplash only I had paid for. I posted the voice memo of Diane telling someone at the HOA that I was emotionally unstable and that they were managing the home on my behalf. I shared the forged co-occupancy form with annotations Ethan's legal commentary and a polite red arrow pointing to the signature that looked nothing like mine. I didn't rant. I didn't name-call. I didn't even use the word narcissist. I wrote like someone with nothing to prove, but everything to document. By the time I hit post, it was 8:12 a.m. By 8:37 a.m., there were 47 comments. By 9:14, a neighbor named Anna reposted it with the caption, "This is what gaslighting looks like in real life. Read every word." By 9:26, Rachel replied. Her post was longer than mine, laced with platitudes, scripture, and an odd mix of defense and deflection. We never meant harm. We never expected things to become so public. I wish Claire had come to us privately. The comments turned quickly. You went public first. You made the GoFundMe. This is classic family manipulation. Claire, we see you. One user, a woman I didn't know, wrote, "My sister did this to me too. Thank you for speaking." That one made me pause. Evelyn called at 10:15. "Well done," she said simply. "You didn't burn the house down. You just let them show us the match in their own hand." I closed my eyes and let that sit for a moment. By noon, the GoFundMe was suspended for potential fraud. By 2, a local faith mom brand Rachel had partnered with for a series of Instagram product promos posted a statement, "We do not condone deceptive fundraising or family manipulation under any circumstances." The comments flooded in, and not in her favor. "That's the house from her video, right?" But it wasn't hers. "How do you steal a home from your sister and still quote Proverbs?" She deleted her original post by sunset. I sat on the porch with my laptop open, the wind warm for November. The house behind me was quiet. Real quiet. For once, it didn't feel like I was borrowing space from ghosts or hosting trespassers with matching DNA. It felt mine. My inbox pinged. Subject potential feature on community justice. Are you open to talking? I read it twice. Then once more. I didn't answer yet. But this time, it wouldn't be Rachel controlling the story. Justice isn't loud. It's quiet when the room finally empties. The echo inside the house had changed. No longer sharp, no longer accusing. Just space open and uninterested in holding anything more than I was ready to leave behind. I had packed the last of the kitchen this morning. Not because I had to, but because I could. Because staying would be another kind of war, and for once I wasn't interested in victory, I was interested in peace. I never imagined peace would look like moving boxes and silence. The couch the kids had once sprawled across now leaned against a wall half wrapped in clear plastic. The bedroom once invaded without permission was stripped bare. I didn't cry. Not when I packed, not when I signed the final sale agreement, Not even when I turned off the utilities, this time in my name, under my control. Control? Not revenge? Just control. Rachel left a voicemail the night before. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, like someone who had finally realized they weren't winning the argument in every room they walked into. Claire, I just thought maybe we could talk. The kids keep asking about you. Mom's not doing great. I know things got twisted. We're family. That still counts for something, doesn't it? I didn't answer. I didn't delete it either. Some truths are meant to sit in your pocket, not your chest. Evelyn's porch was colder than usual, or maybe I was just adjusting to the weight that was no longer on my back. She handed me a glass of sweet tea, too much sugar as always, and something else, a small velvet pouch. Inside was a gold locket, faintly tarnished but clearly loved. I opened it and found a photograph of a woman with the same eyes as mine. Aunt Linda, Evelyn said. Before your mother turned her world upside down. She left with nothing but her name and this locket. I always meant to give it to someone who earned it back. I didn't speak. Just nodded. Just understood. Jared arrived with his truck right before sunset. He'd offered to help without condition, without question. A friend from my HOA meeting who believed that truth wasn't always loud, but it was always right. He smiled as he lifted a box labeled Office, Keep, and balanced it effortlessly under one arm. You sure about this? He asked gently. Yes, I said steady. For once, I'm not running from something. I'm moving toward myself. Later, from the driver's seat of the moving van, I looked back one last time. Diane and Rachel stood on the porch, their silhouettes barely distinguishable against the gathering dark. Rachel took a small step forward. Diane didn't move at all. Neither of them waved. Neither did I. Let them keep the porch. I took back everything else. I used to call it healing. Now I just call it mine. The walls were white not because I hadn't chosen a color yet, but because I liked the way morning light played on clean surfaces. There were no family portraits, no hand-me-down curtains sewn with obligation. Just soft shadows, wood floors, and silence that didn't accuse. The apartment wasn't big. One bedroom, one bathroom, a balcony that overlooked the peaks of Colorado Springs if you tilted your head just right. But it was all mine, every rent check signed by me, every plant watered on my own schedule. Every room knew only what I allowed into it. I had a cake lemon store bought with uneven frosting and no candles. I had a vinyl spinning Sam Cooke on low volume, and a single box left unopened in the corner labeled in Sharpie, only keep what loves you back. This was how I wanted to turn 37. No fanfare, no pressure, no false reconciliation. My 30th birthday had been at Diane's insistence. A potluck I never wanted with decorations Rachel picked, and no one remembering what I actually liked. That year, no one showed up on time. Some never came at all. This year, it was just me, and that was okay. There was a knock at the door around 2 in the afternoon. I opened it to find a bouquet of yellow tulips leaning against the frame, and Jared's truck already pulling out of the parking lot. The card read, "To the quietest storm I've ever met. Happy birthday. Dinner tomorrow, Jay." I smiled, not because I had to, but because it reached somewhere in me I hadn't touched in a while. My phone buzzed. Evelyn was calling. I answered and turned the camera around so she could see the cake. "Lemon, huh?" she said, her voice grainy but still warm. "You finally stopped trying to like chocolate just because your mother said it was a woman's flavor." "I've stopped trying a lot of things," I said. She grinned. "Good. Then here's your gift." She unfolded a piece of paper and read slowly. "You owe no one your silence. Not even the ones who fed you. Not even the ones who named you." It was a poem. I didn't ask who wrote it. I just let the words settle. After we hung up, I poured myself a cup of tea and let the afternoon stretch. There were no plans to check, no rooms to brace for, no footsteps to anticipate. A voicemail blinked on my screen, Dr. Naomi. I'd missed her call during the tulip drop-off. Just checking in. Today matters more than you think. You didn't just survive something, you ended something. That deserves cake, or champagne, or peace, whichever's harder to find. I laughed under my breath. Scrolling through my messages, I saw one I didn't recognize. A woman. No profile photo, no mutual friends. You don't know me, but I read your story. Thank you. I didn't reply, but I saved it. Later, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. No makeup, no earrings, just my face, and a quiet kind of clarity. I didn't wait for the mirror to tell me something I didn't know. I didn't ask it for forgiveness or flattery. I just looked and didn't flinch. Jared texts dinner tomorrow. Just us. No ghosts. Forgiveness isn't owed, and sometimes freedom means never giving it. The cursor blinked on an empty Google Doc, blinking like a dare. There was no deadline, no editor pacing in another time zone. Just me, my chipped coffee mug half full. 3 sleepy plants leaning toward a sunlit window and a morning too quiet to pretend anything was urgent. I typed the first sentence. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Then I stopped trying to sound wise and just wrote what was true. Here's what they didn't tell you about survival. I didn't know where it would go. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere. I just knew it was mine to begin. Outside spring had finally taken hold. Even in Colorado, the air had softened. People were jogging in short sleeves again, and porch flags flapped instead of froze. I kept the windows cracked just wide enough to let in air, not memory. A stack of letters sat in the corner of my desk. Most were from women I didn't know, readers who had found my HOA testimony on the blog and passed it along like a lifeline. One envelope remained unopened, addressed in Rachel's handwriting. I had moved it 3 times that week, from drawer to counter to desk. I thought today I might open it, but I didn't. I didn't need to. I knew the rhythm of her sentences before they started. I knew how the phrases would curl into apologies that weren't really apologies. Words like misunderstood and family matters are complicated. She would write about her kids, maybe quote a verse about grace, maybe ask if I missed the little ones. Maybe I did, but not enough to reopen a door I'd nailed shut with truth. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and uploaded the full testimony, the original file, not the version that got trimmed, for the HOA hearing. It included the letter Diane forged, the metadata from the nanny cam, the voice memo of Jason muttering, "She's too smart for her own good." I added a title that had lived in my head for weeks. Inheritance isn't always a gift. I clicked publish. I didn't check analytics. I didn't wait to see who shared it or how many people commented. I just closed the tab and turned off the Wi-Fi. In the corner of the room on a shelf Evelyn helped me install sat a thin journal from my childhood. The cover was blue, felt fraying at the edges. Inside was a single drawing I barely remembered, making a house boxy and crooked with too many windows and no people. When Evelyn visited last week, she saw it and smiled. You knew even then, she'd whispered. Maybe I did. Not everything needed to be populated. Not every memory had to be redeemed. Some things were never supposed to stay. Some houses were meant to be left behind. Some people too. My inbox dinged. An email from Modern Grit, a digital magazine I'd started reading months ago. Subject: potential column stories like yours matter. I left it unread, but not for long. There was a pull I recognized now, not revenge, not righteousness, just relief expanding into purpose. I stared out the window. The apartment didn't have ghosts. It had sun and space, and shelves I hung myself. It had a door no one had keys to but me, Claire to herself. They don't need to say sorry. I'm no longer waiting. I stood stretched. Let the morning wrap around me. There would be more stories. There would be more battles, yes, but not this one. Not again. I glanced at the unopened letter one last time and gently placed it back in the drawer. Let them tell their version. I've already published mine. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together.